Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. There's a certain kind of silence that follows you when you start realizing your marriage isn't what you thought it was. It's not loud or obvious. It's quiet, creeping, like the hum of a fridge you only notice when everything else stops. That's what life with Emily had become. A constant, low-grade tension I'd learned to ignore, until I couldn't anymore. Emily was the type who loved being the center of attention. She had this effortless charm that drew people in. When we first met, that spark was intoxicating. It made me feel lucky, blessed even. But somewhere along the way, her charm became a weapon, a tool she used to make me feel small when the spotlight wasn't on her. Doug and I have been best friends since college. We did everything together, weddings, kids, even bought houses in the same neighborhood. Our wives, Emily and Vanessa, hit it off immediately, becoming inseparable. From the outside, it all looked perfect. Two happy couples living the suburban dream. But perfection is just a filter. And underneath it, things were starting to crack. Emily had this habit of throwing jabs in public, little comments that came off as playful to others, but hit me like gut punches. Oh, Jack, he's our house puppy. Loyal, low maintenance, and always available. People laughed. I smiled. What else could I do? Calling her out in front of others would have made me look petty. Instead, I buried it, told myself she was joking. But deep down, I knew it wasn't a joke. It was a message. Doug noticed it too. One night, after a neighborhood dinner party, we were both outside, leaning against his truck, nursing beers while the women gossiped inside. She does it again, man, he said quietly. I saw your face. Does what? Treats you like your background noise. Like you're just there. I shrugged. It's just her way. You know Emily. Doug frowned. That doesn't make it okay. That stuck with me. The cruise was supposed to be a reset. Our 10-year anniversary. 10 years of building a life together. I booked the tickets, upgraded the rooms, even planned surprise excursions. Emily smiled when I told her, hugged me tight, and whispered, "You always know how to make me feel special." And for a moment, I believed it. We boarded the ship with excitement buzzing around us. The Caribbean breeze, the endless blue, the sense of escape. But even on vacation, the dynamic didn't change. At dinner on the second night, I ordered a steak. Emily wrinkled her nose. Still pretending you're a meat guy, she teased loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Jack eats 2 carrots and thinks he's a wild man. Everyone laughed, except me. Later that night, I asked her, "Why'd you say that?" She rolled her eyes. It was a joke. You're too sensitive. You always say that. Every time I try to tell you something hurt me, it's suddenly my fault for feeling anything. She sighed. This again. I didn't push. I just nodded and walked away, standing out on the deck alone as the ship glided through the dark water. The next day, we hit the beach. Doug and I tossed a football in the surf while the girls sipped cocktails under an umbrella. Everything looked picture perfect. Emily laughed, snapped photos, wrapped her arm around me for a selfie. But later that night, when I posted it, she untagged herself. Said the lighting was bad. Said I should have known better. I slept on the couch in our suite that night. Not because we argued, because I didn't want to be near her. It was day 4 of the cruise when things shifted. We were sitting at breakfast, and Emily leaned over to Vanessa. "Spot A?" she asked, her voice bright. "Girls only detox time?" Vanessa lit up. "Yes, please. My pores are begging." They kissed our cheeks and disappeared with their oversized tote bags and glossy sunglasses, leaving us to our cigars and whiskey. But something about the way she said it, something about her eyes, they weren't telling the full story. And for the first time, I didn't ignore it. I checked my smartwatch. Emily's fitness tracker was still synced from time we tried to get healthier together. A ping appeared. Suite 9C. Not the spa. I looked at Doug. "Hey, does Vanessa use her tracker?" He checked his app. "Yeah, she's in the same place." We didn't say anything for a second. Then Doug muttered, "That's not the spa." My stomach turned. We started walking. Quietly, purposefully, down the hallways, past laughing passengers and steel doors. The closer we got to 9C, the louder the music, the more my chest burned. Then we saw it. Curtains barely drawn. Champagne, flutes clinking. Emily and Vanessa, laughing, lounging, flirting in a hot tub with strangers who didn't even try to hide their hands. I didn't breathe. Doug stood frozen beside me. Neither of us moved. We didn't burst in. We didn't yell. We walked away. And that's when everything changed. Doug and I didn't speak a word as we left the sweet hallway behind us. We walked in silence, our footsteps echoing on the polished floors of the ship as if the sound could somehow drown out what we'd just seen. I kept playing it back in my head over and over. Emily's carefree laughter, the way she leaned into that guy's chest like she'd done it before, the glint of Vanessa's wine glass catching the afternoon light, her hand resting casually on someone else's knee. None of them looked like they were just having fun. This wasn't spot A innocence. This was betrayal dressed in luxury robes and champagne bubbles. Back in the cigar lounge, we sat at the far end, away from the crowd, each nursing a drink in heavy silence. Doug was the first to speak. Did you see the way she was touching him? Like he wasn't a stranger. His voice was low, shaky, barely held together. I nodded, jaw clenched. They didn't even look guilty. They looked comfortable. Doug stared at his glass. I've known Vanessa since high school, man. I thought I knew everything about her. And now I feel like I've been living with a stranger. I couldn't bring myself to speak yet. My thoughts were too loud. The way Emily had dismissed me so many times, the constant stream of sarcasm disguised as humor, the subtle digs about my job, my choices, the way I parent. It all came into focus now. She didn't just fall into someone else's arms. She'd been walking toward it the entire time. The affair didn't start in that suite. It started in the way she stopped looking at me like I was worth something. Are we really going to let them get away with this? Doug asked, voice bitter. No, I said, finally breaking the silence. We're going to make sure they remember this cruise forever. We spent the rest of that evening planning in whispers and half-sentences. The more we talked, the more the shock wore off and something colder took its place. Precision. Strategy. We weren't going to blow up the situation in a drunken rage. No, that's what they would expect. We were going to be smarter than that. Our first move was the crew. Doug found a young staffer on the housekeeping team. Guy couldn't have been more than 22, who we'd seen chatting with the Bachelors the day before. We caught him at shift change, slipped him a generous tip, and asked if the suites had internal surveillance. He hesitated, said it wasn't for guests to access, said management would never approve. But money speaks, and a little quiet persuasion goes a long way when you're dealing with board cruise workers. Within 30 minutes, we had confirmation. The VIP suite had security footage stored on an internal network, and our friend had access. We didn't ask for a copy just yet. That would come later. Our next move was locking them out. The idea was simple. Once they left that suite, they wouldn't be able to get back in. The crew member worked some digital magic with the keycard system. It wasn't permanent, just enough to leave them confused and humiliated in front of their new friends. That night, the women came back late. We pretended to be asleep, though every part of me wanted to scream. Emily slipped into bed like nothing happened. She smelled like perfume and chlorine. I laid still, eyes open in the dark, listening to her breathing, memorizing the sound so I could forget it later. The next morning, Doug and I woke early and met at the breakfast buffet. The tension between us and our wives was electric. They were chipper, pretending to be exhausted from their spa day. Emily complained about the cucumber water. Vanessa joked about seaweed wraps. They had rehearsed the lies, probably even laughed about them as they dried off and changed into clean clothes. That was the final push we needed. We confirmed the screen time with the entertainment director that afternoon. The captain's spotlight ceremony was the perfect stage. Everyone would be there, including the Bachelor group. We secured a toast slot under the guise of honoring our 10-year anniversaries. And we brought a flash drive, now containing a carefully clipped version of the footage, just enough to prove the point. The lounge, the hot tub, the drinks, the laughter. Their hands, their smiles. As we got dressed for the event, Emily kissed my cheek. You're being so quiet this trip. Everything okay? I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time felt nothing but resolve. I'm great, I said, adjusting my tie. Tonight's going to be unforgettable. There's a surreal calm that settles in once your decision is made. The pain doesn't vanish, it just sharpens, focuses, turns into something cold and methodical. That's where Doug and I were mentally, no longer stumbling through betrayal, but moving through it with purpose. We spent the hours before the ceremony like soldiers prepping for a mission. I triple-checked the flash drive, made sure the video format was compatible with the ship's AV system, and confirmed with the event coordinator that our toast would be just after the captain's closing remarks. "It's sweet," she said, smiling. 10 years together, still wanting to stand up and say something publicly? That's rare. I returned her smile. It's going to be a memorable moment. Emily spent most of that day lounging by the pool, sunglasses perched on her head, drink in hand, as if the world owed her the relaxation. She waved me over once, asked if I wanted to join. I told her I was going to grab a quick nap. In reality, Doug and I were finalizing every detail, rehearsing what we'd say, ensuring we didn't overdo it. There's a line between revenge and self-destruction, and we intended to walk right up to it, smile, and leave a crater in our wake. Vanessa, equally oblivious, spent her afternoon shopping at the cruise boutique, likely picking out something special to wear that night. It was wild how easily they slipped back into their roles, like their betrayal was something that could be rinsed off with a good spa treatment and a night of pretending. They had no idea what was coming. As evening fell, the grand hall began to fill. The captain's spotlight ceremony was one of the cruise's major events. A final toast, some live music, a chant for passengers to dress up and pretend they weren't about to return to real life. The room was decked out in navy and gold, with soft lighting and waiters gliding between tables, balancing champagne flutes. Doug and I arrived first, dressed sharp calm. The crew member who helped us gave a discreet nod from the AV booth, signaling everything was ready. Our wives arrived 10 minutes later, both glowing like nothing in the world had touched them. Emily wore a silver dress that clung in all the ways she knew I used to admire. She leaned in, whispering, "I'm so proud of us, babe." I stared at her for a beat longer than I should have, and simply said, "Me too." Vanessa giggled beside Doug, looping her arm through his. "We're going to steal the show." "Oh," Doug said, lifting his glass. "We absolutely are." The captain gave a charming speech, thanked the crew, toasted the voyage, and then the event host stepped forward. "Before we wrap up the evening, we have a special toast from two couples celebrating 10 wonderful years together. Jack and Emily, Doug and Vanessa, come on up." The applause was warm. Our wives stood with us, smiling, basking in the spotlight they thought was theirs. I took the mic first. 10 years. That's a milestone, right? I began. You go through a lot in a decade. Highs, lows, everything in between. But what really matters is trust, loyalty, knowing the person beside you would never betray that trust. Emily looked at me, smiling, not yet hearing the shift in my tone. Doug stepped in. "Sometimes, though, you find out that trust wasn't mutual. That while you were planning your future, they were planning spa days." Vanessa blinked, her smile faltering. "We put together something to celebrate that honesty," I said. A little behind-the-scenes look at what made this cruise so unforgettable. The AV screen flickered on behind us. Music faded out. At first, soft images of our vacation played, beaches, sunsets, laughter. Then the footage shifted. The suite, the hot tub, Emily, Vanessa, the Bachelors, clinking glasses, touching, laughing. The entire room fell into stunned silence. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Murmurs turned to whispers. One woman audibly said, "Oh my God." Emily turned toward me, face drained of color. "Jack, what is this?" Her voice cracked. I didn't answer. I just raised my glass. To honesty. Doug followed, staring directly at Vanessa. And to new beginnings. The footage ended. The screen went black. The host stood frozen. The captain looked furious. The Bachelors, who had slunk in unnoticed earlier, were now getting booed by other guests. One of them tried to slip out the back. Emily's voice shook. "You set us up." I turned to her slowly. "No, Emily. You set yourself up. I just gave you a stage." She tried to speak again, but the room was already moving on. Whispers, judgment, eyes everywhere. She wasn't the center of admiration now. She was the epicenter of humiliation. Doug and I left the stage, handed our mics to a stunned event host, and walked straight out of the hall. Back in our cabins, we packed. The crew had already arranged for new rooms on another deck. Clean slates. That night, we didn't mourn. We didn't get drunk. We sat on a quiet balcony, watching the stars, the ocean endless around us. Think they'll ever forget it? Doug asked. Not a chance, I replied. The morning after the spotlight ceremony felt like waking up after a storm. Everything was eerily quiet, but the damage was everywhere. Word spread fast on a cruise ship. Whispers at breakfast, stares in the hallways, people nudging each other as we passed. It was like the entire boat had become a courtroom, and Emily and Vanessa were already convicted in the court of public opinion. I wasn't interested in gloating. I didn't feel victorious. I felt clean, like something toxic had finally been scrubbed from my skin. Doug and I sat at the back of the sun deck, sunglasses on, coffee in hand, watching the waves without speaking for a while. Eventually, he broke the silence. Vanessa tried to get into my room last night. She cried through the door for 10 minutes. I didn't turn. Did you answer? No, he said. Did Emily try you? Once. Knocked, paused, then walked away. I heard her sobbing down the hall. Doug sipped his coffee. That feel good? Not really, I admitted. I thought it would, but all I felt was nothing. Like the last piece of whatever I once felt for her just evaporated. He nodded. Yeah, same. The ship was docking in 2 days. That gave us time. Time to think, to prepare for what came next. We didn't just want out of the cruise. We wanted out of the marriages. And we wanted out clean. We spoke to a cruise liaison, explained that we wanted to avoid any further conflict. The staff already knew. The AV guy had told them everything. They arranged for our wives to be moved to separate decks and politely reminded us that while personal drama is not against the rules, disturbing other guests was. Doug and I laughed at that later. Disturbing other guests, he said. Pretty sure cheating in a hot tub with random guys qualifies. Over the next day, Emily made several attempts to reach me. Notes slipped under my door. Voicemails I didn't check. One afternoon, I returned from swim to find her sitting outside my new cabin door. She looked smaller than usual. Let's put together. Gone was the woman with the confident stride and the practiced charm. What sat in front of me was someone who'd just lost control of a world she thought she ruled. She stood when she saw me. Please, just 5 minutes. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Say whatever you need to say. Her voice shook. I messed up. I wasn't thinking. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I was drunk, no. I cut in. You were deliberate. You weren't drunk when you lied about going to the spa. You weren't drunk when you laughed in that hot tub. You weren't drunk when you got dressed and came back to our room pretending everything was fine. She blinked, eyes already glossy. I didn't think it would hurt you like this. You didn't think at all, I said. Because you stopped seeing me as someone worth respecting. She looked away. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. That's the part that makes it worse, I said. You threw away 10 years of marriage for something that didn't even matter to you. I don't want to lose you, she whispered. You already did, I replied. She didn't try to follow when I walked away. That was the last time I saw her on the ship. Doug's final exchange with Vanessa went similarly. Short, final, no screaming, no begging. Just the undeniable truth that the women we once loved had chosen thrills over loyalty, attention over integrity. When the ship docked, we left without ceremony. Our luggage was waiting. So were our next steps. The ride home was quiet, each of us processing in our own way. The world looked different now, less filtered, more honest. Painful, yes, but real. Once back, we filed. Divorces were inevitable. We had footage, statements, timestamps. They had nothing but excuses. Neither of us asked for much, just the house, joint custody with firm boundaries, and clean exits. Their attorneys tried to push back, of course. Said it was a private matter. Said public embarrassment shouldn't factor into divorce terms. But our lawyers shut it down fast. The evidence isn't just emotional, my attorney said during the first meeting. It's strategic. It's betrayal, premeditated, recorded, and displayed under circumstances that no judge would overlook. The legal path was straightforward from there. Emily's parents reached out, embarrassed, disappointed. Her mother called me crying. We raised her better than this, she kept repeating. I didn't say what I was thinking. That raising someone and actually knowing them are two very different things. The support poured in from places I didn't expect. Old friends, colleagues, even some neighbors who had watched our marriages from the outside like they were sitcoms, now offered their sympathies and stories of their own. It reminded me how common this was, how many people live in silence because they're scared to speak up. Doug and I started joking about writing a book. How to burn a bridge with style, he'd say, or maybe how to reclaim a vacation and ruin a cheater in one cruise. We laughed, but deep down, we both knew the laughter was real healing. And healing, I was beginning to learn, is the ultimate revenge. The paperwork was processed faster than I expected. Maybe it was the evidence. Maybe it was the fact that neither Emily nor Vanessa had the energy to fight. The story had followed us off the ship like a shadow, stretching out into our neighborhood, leaking into social circles and Facebook groups. People whispered, glanced, pretended not to know, but they knew. You don't drop a scandal like that in the middle of a luxury cruise and expect it to stay contained. The footage may have been wiped from the cruise's official channels, but plenty of passengers had taken out their phones during the ceremony. Clips surfaced online, blurry, grainy, but undeniable. Emily and Vanessa's faces, their laughter, their hands. It didn't take long for it to make the rounds. Doug and I met once a week now, usually at the little sports bar down the road, where the bartender already knew not to ask about our ex-wives. We didn't sit there and rehash the betrayal. We didn't need to. We'd lived it. We'd burned it down. We were past it. What we talked about instead was freedom, what it meant to finally breathe without second-guessing your every move. What it felt like to come home to silence and realize you didn't miss the noise. We talked about the kids, how we'd protect them from the worst of it, how we'd never use them as weapons in the fallout. The first time Emily asked to meet, I almost didn't reply, but curiosity got the better of me. We met at a public park, near the pond where we used to walk after dinner. She looked tired, not disheveled, not broken, just dulled, like a version of herself with the light turned down. I just wanted to talk, she said, her hands wrapped tightly around a paper coffee cup. Then talk, I said. She hesitated. It's not about us. I know the ship sailed. I didn't correct her, because she was right. It's about the aftermath, she continued. I lost my job. My inbox is flooded with messages from people I used to work with. Some are supportive. Most aren't. You reap what you sow, I said simply. I get that. I do. But this destroyed me. No, Emily, I replied calmly. You destroyed you. I just stopped hiding it. She flinched but didn't argue. What do I even do now? That's not my problem to solve anymore, I said. You made your choices. Now you live with them. She nodded slowly. I miss our daughter. You'll see her. We've got a custody agreement in place. But if you try to play games with her like you did with me, I'll fight it. She blinked, a tear slipping down one cheek. I'm not the enemy, Jack. You were, I said. Maybe you're not anymore. But you don't get to rewrite what happened. She didn't respond. Just sat there, staring at her coffee. Eventually, she said goodbye and walked away, leaving behind the faint scent of the perfume I once loved and now couldn't stand. Doug had a similar conversation with Vanessa a week later. Same tone, same regrets. They weren't trying to get back what they'd lost. That much was clear. But they also weren't ready to accept the new reality, that their names no longer held weight, that their charm had limits, and that the image they built had cracked so publicly it would never be patched clean. Meanwhile, my daughter began to notice the change. She asked fewer questions about her mom. She adjusted quickly, quicker than I expected. Maybe kids sense when things aren't real. Maybe she'd been absorbing the tension all along. Now, when I picked her up from school, she smiled more, told me longer stories, hugged me tighter. At night, I started sleeping better. No tossing, no pretending not to hear the silence on the other side of the bed. I was alone, but not lonely. I was whole. I poured my focus into work, into being present, into rebuilding. I didn't rush into dating. That wasn't what I needed. I needed to reclaim my identity without trying to fill the space Emily left behind. Doug and I planned a guy's trip. Nothing flashy. Just a cabin in the mountains, a grill, a couple fishing rods, and the understanding that sometimes the best recovery is found in simplicity. One evening, sitting on the back porch with a beer in hand, watching the sun drop behind the hills, Doug turned to me and said, "You ever think we should have done things differently? Like not gone public? I shook my head. No, that wasn't revenge. That was exposure. They built their lives on lies. We just turned on the lights. He nodded. Still, it was brutal. Yeah, I said, but so was living in the dark. Healing wasn't some dramatic transformation. It didn't happen in a weekend or with one long hike into the woods. It happened in mundane moments. The way I learned to cook for just 2 instead of 3, how I rearranged the living room and realized I no longer had to consider anyone else's opinion about throw pillows, how silence, once deafening, had turned peaceful. My daughter and I developed routines. Every Friday night was pizza and a movie. She picked the toppings, I picked the film. Saturday mornings, we hit the farmer's market. She loved tasting the honey samples and petting the dogs that wander between booths. And for once, I wasn't checking my phone or worrying about where Emily was or what life she might be spinning that day. I was just there, present. Doug was settling into the same rhythm. We still met weekly, but our conversations had changed. No more bitterness. No more dwelling. He was seeing someone slowly. A woman named Leanne he met through work. They weren't serious yet, but she made him laugh, and that was more than Vanessa had done in years. I was genuinely happy for him. He'd earned it. We both had. Emily still hovered in the periphery. She showed up to pickups and drop-offs, polite but distant. Once, she tried to linger longer than usual, asking if we could maybe catch up. I told her kindly but firmly, "We're not friends, Emily. We're co-parents. Let's keep it that way." She didn't push after that. Part of me wondered if she still believed there was a path back. But if she did, she never said it out loud again. The legal side of things was done. The divorce finalized, the assets divided. The house was mine. She moved into a townhouse across town, close enough to see our daughter, but far enough not to haunt me. She kept the car, I kept the furniture, and we both walked away with what really mattered. The truth carved into the center of our story like a scar you don't bother hiding. But scars fade. One afternoon, a package arrived at the studio. No name on the label, just my address scrawled in neat handwriting. Inside was a photo book, black leather, simple, elegant. I opened it cautiously, half expecting some passive-aggressive message or a final plea from Emily. But it wasn't from her. It was from one of the passengers from the cruise. A woman named Lisa, who I vaguely remembered chatting with at dinner one night. The note inside read, "You probably don't remember me, but I remember your toast. I was going through something similar, and hearing you speak made me feel less alone. This book is for you and your daughter. May it hold happier memories." Inside were candid shots from the cruise, sunsets, waves, moments I didn't even realize had been captured. One of me laughing with Doug at the pool. One of my daughter asleep on my shoulder during the talent show. It was a reminder that even in the middle of betrayal, there are still good moments worth holding on to. That night, I showed the album to my daughter. She smiled at the photos, pointing at herself, giggling. "You look happy here, Daddy." "I am," I told her. I didn't feel it at the time, but I see it now. She leaned her head against my arm. "I'm glad you're happy again." Kids say things like that without knowing how deep they cut. Or maybe they do. Maybe she saw more than I ever gave her credit for. Later, after she went to bed, I sat on the porch, the album beside me, and thought about what happiness really meant. It wasn't big or loud. It didn't come with announcements or confetti. It came in the stillness after a storm, when the world feels quiet again and you realize you're still standing, still breathing, still capable of joy. That was the moment I knew I'd made it through. Not just survived, healed. The day we stepped into the courtroom, there wasn't any tension. No last-minute stunts, no dramatics. Just cold tile floors, heavy wooden benches, and the echo of heels down polished halls. I didn't feel nervous. If anything, I felt detached, like I was watching the whole thing from behind a thick glass wall. I'd already lived through the worst of it. This was just the paperwork catching up. Emily walked in a few minutes after me. She looked plain, not in the way you say someone lost their glow, but in the way someone stops trying to perform. Her hair pulled back, no designer bag, no dramatic jewelry, just a woman about to legally end a life she didn't value until it slipped through her fingers. Her lawyer greeted mine with a polite nod. They knew the drill. We all did. It was a no-fault filing. Irreconcilable differences. Except the real reason sat like a shadow between us. Betrayal. captured on tape, broadcast for hundreds to see. When we sat the table across from each other, there was no eye contact. The judge was prompt, flipping through the folders with the efficiency of someone who'd seen 1,000 failed marriages and knew exactly what this was. My attorney stood and delivered the facts. The marriage lasted 10 years. The petitioner seeks full ownership of the shared residence, which the respondent has not contested. Custody terms have been agreed upon: shared legal custody, primary physical custody, with scheduled visitation. There are no financial disputes. However, we'd like to submit documentation that supports the division of assets, including time-stamped footage provided voluntarily by a third party. Emily's lawyer barely flinched. They knew the evidence was airtight. There wasn't much to say. The judge glanced at the footage stills, nodded slowly, and turned to Emily. "Do you contest any part of this?" She shook her head. "No, Your Honor." "Then I see no reason not to grant the motion." And just like that, it was done. Walking out of the courthouse felt anticlimactic. No applause. No closure speech. Just a final chapter closed with a signature and a seal. Outside, the air was crisp, and for the first time I noticed how blue the sky was. Funny how you miss that when you're consumed with who's lying to you and why. Doug called later that evening. "So, it's official. Signed and sealed," I said. "It's over. You feel different? I feel lighter." He laughed. "Yeah, that's the word. Like dropping a weight you didn't know you were carrying." We talked about setting up something for the kids. A weekend camping trip maybe. Keep things normal for them. Give them memories that didn't come with baggage or tension. We were determined not to let the past dictate how we parented. That was one thing we both agreed on. Our kids deserved better than the stories that came before them. A few days later, I bumped into one of Emily's old friends at the grocery store. Melissa. She used to come to our house for wine nights, always bringing that over-the-top laugh and stories about her dating life. She didn't look smug, just tired. "I heard about everything," she said gently. "I just wanted to say, I am sorry. I always thought you two were solid." I shrugged. So did I. But sometimes people just get good at wearing masks. She nodded. "She's not doing great, if that means anything." "It doesn't," I said, not unkindly. "But I hope she figures herself out." Melissa gave me a small smile. "You're handling this better than most would." "Maybe," I replied. "Or maybe I just had time to fall apart before anyone noticed." Later that night, I pulled out the official decree from the folder and sat with it for a moment. 10 years summarized in a few lines of legal jargon. Names, dates, signatures. All so sterile, so clean. It didn't reflect the memories, the heartbreak, the slow erosion of trust. But that was okay. I didn't need a document to validate what I'd been through. The truth had already been carved into the walls of my life. My daughter climbed into my lap with a book, interrupting the spiral of thoughts. "Can we read this one tonight?" she asked, holding up her favorite story. I smiled. "Of course." And just like that, I was reminded why I kept moving forward. Why I didn't crumble under the weight of it all. Because there was still life after betrayal. Still love, still laughter, still a reason to believe in better things. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like, and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.